Yes, hello and welcome folks. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my little video presentation thingamabobby jobs. And as you can see on the screen there, today's video is all about Dice Masters drafting tips. The spoiler previews for the draft pack cards that have been floating around on the social medias, Wizkids unboxing video from the Avengers Infinity set has all got me thinking about drafting lately. So if you're a new player, you might find these tips quite useful just to get you started with the impending arrival, he says, fingers crossed. Who knows how long they might take in current worldwide circumstances. But they're coming down the pipeline nonetheless, so these might help you out with the new draft packs and a different way of playing that you might not have done much before. If you're a seasoned player, then I welcome comments and feedback on the tips. Perhaps you agree with them, perhaps you contend with them and you've got a better tip that you'd like to put out there. Please do let me know and correspond through the comments below. And in fact, while you're down there, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up like, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, Dice Masters drafting is on my mind at the moment, and these are tips, 4 tips in fact, that I've gathered up over the years of drafting myself, or from speaking to other people who are really great drafters, or from some of the community sources that might have been before your time, folks, like the Reserve Pool, who used to talk about drafting a great deal. And I've kind of accumulated these tips, and I'm going to focus on them for today's video. So without further ado, let's get into it. And the first one on the cards here is remember the fundamentals. Whether you're constructing a team in a draft, whether you're constructing a team for casual play down your local gaming store, or whether you're constructing a team for the highest level of competitive play, the fundamentals of Dice Masters always remain the same. What are those fundamentals, Chris? I hear you call from the back. Well, I'm glad you asked. Here they are. You need a win condition, you need ramp and churn, and you need utility and control, all to be elements catered for by the team that you've built. The only difference really is that with drafting you don't have the flexibility of choice that you would have ordinarily with a constructed event. You know, you can't just leaf through your binder and pick the most optimal choice. But you certainly should be thinking about these 3 kind of core categories around the card types that are going to be passing you by in order to get yourself set and ready to go for a successful drafting team. You need a win condition, you need a way to win games. You need ramp and churn, you need the spending power to buy the dice that you want, and then you need to churn your way through to get your hands on them when you want them. And you're going to need utility and control, whether that be a global that supports your win condition, or a global that's going to get in the way of other win conditions, or a bit of control like some removal that's going to help you run interference on your team. And as long as you're kind of keeping these ideas at the forefront and thinking about what is my win condition going to be, what's going to help me ramp and churn my way through this team, what are the utility globals that are going to support it and make it successful, what are the utility and control pieces that are going to get in the way of my opponent, and it kind of helps you structure the way that you go about drafting, and it gives you a kind of a focus, a purpose in terms of the way that you look at the cards when you're reviewing them as they get passed around. One thing I like to do when it comes to a win condition, well in fact 2 things here, is I like to pick a win condition right out of my open pack. So that very first pack that I open up, unless there's something overwhelmingly more attractive in there, I will generally pick a win condition as my very first card. And it might not be the most powerful win condition ever, it might not even be the most powerful or optimal win condition in that set, but I like to just kind of have one that I'm kind of sort of committed to right out the gate, because that super helps me structure the way that I go about doing it. I know others don't approach it that way, but that's something I like to do. And I like to go for cheap win conditions. When it comes to drafting, I like my win conditions to be 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost. Very rarely do I go for the big swingers, because I can't guarantee the ramp and churn. So there you go. Remember the fundamentals, tip number 1. Tip number 2 on the cards then, folks. Read the rainbow. So the rainbow is described as a rainbow draft, and the rainbow is the layout of dice across the table as you're going through the pack opening and building up the draft. In fact, I've got a photo here of one, a bit of a shonky, blurry photo, but one from a Tomb of Annihilation draft that I participated in down at my local gaming store. I'm hoping, please don't, I know there'll be a few panic attacks out there, the dice were fine, the gaps in the slats on the bench, there were no casualties, everything was okay. We're very experienced, talented dice handlers around my local gaming store. But in any case, there you go, there's the rainbow stretched out in front of you. So reading the rainbow is something that's important to the drafting experience, and something that I like to do, because it gives you a sense of how many cards of that particular character there might be knocking around in that draft. So as the draft goes on, as you see the stacks and you start to see what's available, and as it kind of makes its way around the cycle, you can get a sense of who might be picking up what or what's available to you. Now, in the first instance, the cards that you want, the desirable cards that you're trying to pick up, either because you want the card on your team or you want the card in order to increase the dice count on that particular character or action, gives you a good sense of what might be available to you, so you're not kind of pinning your hopes on a lost cause because you're only ever going to have one dice on a card that you really need 2 or 3 on. A great example of there would be a Swarmer, but also it gives you a sense of what might be going on around the rest of the draft and give you a bit of a feel for what your opponents might be picking up and what other characters are around. And when it comes to, going back to my fundamentals, when it comes to picking your control and your utility, if you're familiar enough with the set, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second, if you're familiar enough with the set and you can see from the rainbow what characters are about, you can also sort of get a sense of the risks of that particular win condition coming your way. So read the rainbow, folks. That's my tip number 2. Have a look at the dice. Get a sense for how many of each character is knocking around. Is there a character that's really thin on the ground that everyone's going to be scrabbling to get the 1 or 2 dice for? Is there a character that's abundant that maybe you can do something with? Is there one of them in your opening drawer so that you can get that pinned off and in your pocket ready to go to draft with later on? Read the rainbow, tip number 2. Okay, on to tip number 3 then, guys. Go little or go home. Now, this is a bit of an interesting one. I believe that the success in draft are the small damage. How to describe it? It's the little wins. The big plays, I don't think, are the ways to win a draft. I'd rather have a card that I can do little and often over and over and over again in order to win the draft. Because you're not getting the optimal choice and the flexibility of choice, sometimes going for the big swing, the big boy play, that's going to let you win, trying to drive a beat stick through, isn't going to happen. And in fact, that card that's going to let you chip away 2 damage here, 2 damage here, 2 damage here, that you can do little and often over and over again, especially if you can get a couple of dice for it, I believe is the route to success when it comes to win conditions. So go little or go home. Don't try and go for the big ramp solution to go and buy the big beat stick, unless you've hit it lucky and you've drawn a rare Professor X no more Magnus in your first draw, and then you get handed a mimic borrowed talent as it gets passed along in your second hand of selection, unless you hit it lucky like that. So go for little ramp solutions that's going to help you out. Go for small cheap win conditions that you can do little but often over and over again, repeatable damage. Here's an example of one that's coming up in the new Avengers Infinity pack that really caught my eye when it was spoiled at the World Championships in Memphis. It's a 3-cost mask. It's Black Widow running in the shadows, and she's got Overcrush, and it says Black Widow can only be blocked by sidekicks, and she's a 0-1-2, 0-2-2, and a 1-2-3. Now, on the surface of that, you might think, well, she can only be blocked by sidekicks, so she's only really going to do 1 damage on level 2 or 3 if she gets blocked by that sidekick. If my opponent hasn't got any sidekicks out, well, she'll be unblockable, but again, that's like 1 or 2 damage. But do you know what? This is perfect. This is the prime example of what I'm talking about. Because if you pick this up as a win condition, it's cheap, it's easy, it's repeatable over and over again. It works whether they've got the blocker or they haven't got the blocker. And when it comes to drafting, going right back to my first tip, the utility, the ramp, the utility, the control, the churn that you are selecting to support this card, you can then structure a team around it. And it's not difficult stuff to structure around. So I think the route to success with drafting win conditions is the stuff that you can do little but often, repeatable win conditions that you can do again and again and again. You wouldn't believe the amount of times I've seen people win a Mighty Thor draft, just repeato fielding Kate Bishop and pinging for 1 at a time. The big boy plays, the beat stick plays, the big swing plays do not come around very often in drafting. In fact, you're dealing with walls a lot of the time. So someone like this Black Widow, who you can do little and often, is the route to success. Go little or go home, tip number 3. On to my 4th tip then, folks. You've got to know the set. I alluded to this a little bit earlier on. You've got to know the set. So some level of familiarity with the cards from the sets is going to set you up for success. I was talking about reading the rainbow before, for example, taking a look at the dice, and you can see what characters are available. And if you know your set and you know your cards well enough, you can say, right, well, Oh, there's quite a few Black Widow dice out there, so the likelihood is that there's going to be a few about, and there's enough Black Widow dice out there that there's possibly going to be one of those uncommons that can do the overcrush psychic blocky thing. Definitely a few commons, so it can give you a sense, and also that's another important point about knowing the sets, knowing what a common does, knowing what an uncommon does, and knowing what a rare does, and the kind of distinction between them, and because the likelihood of getting the rare is obviously much lower than the likelihood of getting a common. So your familiarity with the set will help you out. It'll also, as I alluded to before, give you a sense of what might be floating around in the opposing teams. What might my competitors in this draft be picking up and be ready to play against me. And if you know the set and you're reading the rainbow and you're drafting with purpose by following your fundamentals, then you can really set yourself up for success, because by having some knowledge of the cards and having some knowledge of the dice and the stats and just some of the core things, you don't have to be like super encyclopedic nerd about these cards, although I've certainly met some guys like that in the past. It can just set you up for more success, so you'll know how your win condition stacks up against some of the other win conditions that might be floating around, because you've had a look at the dice, you know that there's a lot of one particular character about, you know that the common version of that character has got a nice win condition element to it, and you know the likelihood of it being around is compared to yours being around, and all these types of things. So we've got 3 draft pack sets coming up, folks. We've got the Superman Kryptonite Crisis. That's the later one. I've done these back to front, actually. Now that I'm looking at the screen, I realise I've done it back to front because I've gone the furthest to the closest. But yeah, Superman Kryptonite Crisis, that's the furthest away. Then you've got the Dark Phoenix Saga, that's the next furthest away, and then the Avengers Infinity Gauntlet, which is the closest. So take a look at the spoilers, stay on top of the releases, have a little mooch around in the Dice Coalition Team Builder or on your Sidekick or Transition Zone app, and have a read of cards every now and again just to fill some time on a coffee break or whatever. Get more and more familiar with the cards. Also, just on this point, it'll also stop you from being that annoying person in the draft that everybody's waiting for, that's holding up the passing around of the packs. But I'm not going to get into that today. So there you go then, folks. There's my 4 tips for drafting. So remember your fundamentals, read the rainbow, go little or go home, and get to know your sets. With those 4 tips, I believe that'll set you up for success in drafting, or certainly give you a good starting platform to do well from there on in. Okay, folks, well, thanks for spending some time with me today on this little video. I hope you enjoyed my tips there. I'll reiterate, head on down to the comments below. If you've got any tips that you want to add to that, or you've got any questions, then get in touch by all means. You'll find us on facebook.com/the Ministry of Dice, or you can head over to our website, britroller6.com, and hit the Contact Us button. And while you're down there, hit the like and subscribe for me. I'd really, really appreciate it. Okay, ta-ra now.